All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Stefan Winging It with a guest. Today, we have Gracie.
Hey!
Welcome to the channel.
Thank you.
I was just explaining to Gracie that I feel like my YouTube channel has kind of changed in recent times where, I think it's just so much more fun to just have, other people on, have conversations, get to know people that I think are interesting, that have had, experiences moving to Sweden or whatever it is, because you guys have heard what I have to think about Sweden a million times by now. Gracie and I just met not too long ago, and I've been grilling her a little bit about her experience. I just heard about it. So do you want to maybe fill in my followers about your background, where you're from, how you ended up here?
Of course. Yeah, so I'm Gracie. I grew up in the US in Kansas City, and I moved to Stockholm 2.5 years ago. I moved March of 2020, right before all the borders closed and the world shut down. Yeah. So it felt like I moved to Mars in a way, but I had been living abroad in London and then moved here because my boyfriend is Swedish, so like many of us came to Sweden for love.
Yeah, exactly. We have a very similar story in that aspect.
Exactly.
Everybody's how did you end up in Sweden?
Why Sweden?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's awesome. So you're doing long distance for a while.
Yeah. So I had been to Sweden a lot because we've been together for 5 years. Yeah. So I was going back and forth every 5 months or something, visiting Sweden, and it was super beautiful in the summer, and went in the winter and it was snowy like Narnia, and then made the move and got a job here in 2020.
Nice. So how did you guys meet in the US?
It's a crazy story. It sounds like a rom-com movie, but it is real life. But my best friend in high school was a Swedish foreign exchange student, so she came to Kansas City. We became best friends, and then I was I'm going to go visit you in Sweden at some point. So I went to visit her after my first year of university, and she's childhood friends with my boyfriend. Okay. So I came to Sweden, stayed with her family for a month, and my boyfriend came over to meet the American who was in town, because they're family friends. And then we hit it off love at first sight, and we both love music, and we're playing music at our house, and then we played a show together, and we had 3 magical days in Sweden. And then I was going to London, and he was going to Switzerland. I'm literally, when am I ever going to see you again? Yeah. In my life?
Why not just
exactly. So he is in the mountains in Switzerland, has no cell service. I don't hear from him for 2 weeks. I leave, go to London. Yeah. And then he comes back to Sweden, and I'm gone, and is no, I'm going to come fly to Sweden to see you. So we've seen each other for 3 days in Sweden. Then he flies to London, and we have 3 days in London that are actually a movie, having a picnic in Hyde Park, and going to the Shakespeare Globe, and falling in love in no time. And then we decided after 6 days in total, we're gonna do long distance from Nashville to Sweden.
That's crazy, because sometimes you just know, right? Sometimes you'll date somebody for 3-4 months, and you're just I'm not sure if I want to commit to this. And sometimes just from the moment you meet somebody, you're just wow, this is gonna be a thing.
Exactly. And I'm not that way at all. All my friends are I'm pretty skeptical, especially in relationships, so it was just like you say, it just felt the right thing. And then we did long distance, really long distance for 2 years from Nashville to Sweden, and then I moved to London, which felt so close, because you could take Ryanair flights for no money and fly once a month. And then to Sweden.
That's awesome.
Well, it's
one sec. Is there some weird sound going on? Did you hear that?
I think they're honking.
Sorry about that. There's literally some kids partying, graduating. Yeah.
They ride around in a truck, and then they honk, and they're woo, we're graduating. It sounds like a party outside.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the Swedish kids, they party so hard at their graduations.
Yes.
And they're above the legal drinking age then when they graduate high school. Because in America, you can't drink till you're 21. No. And you graduate at 18. Yeah, if you hear horns in the background,
they're having a great day.
It's that time of year, and we're in here filming a video for you guys. But that is one thing I'm jealous about, not experiencing a Swedish high school graduation.
I mean, it seems pretty good. Yeah. They were going past my house all week, and I kept running to the window to look. It's so much joy. They're having the best time.
Yeah. For those of you that have never graduated in Sweden or seen it, a lot of times they have these trucks that they'll have a whole bunch of students on the back, just partying on the back of these trucks with hay bales and stuff. If you're in the country towns. In Stockholm, I feel you see that a bit less, but they're in cars.
Yeah, or with the big back, and then they have posters.
Just driving around,
partying.
Yeah, crazy.
It's like a party bus, but like Swedish version.
Basically, they have some party buses in Stockholm. I saw that people like rented to do this. So the big ballers out there.
Hilarious.
But anyway, back to your story.
Yes.
Was it ever part of the conversation to like try to convince him to move to America?
Oh yeah, we'll move to the States at some point. But I think it made sense to come here now. Like I wanted to live in Europe, and I was living in London, which I loved, but it was like super expensive, and you were like commuting like all the time every day. So I wanted to stay in Europe at the time, and I like got a great job here, so it made sense to move. But I think at some point we'd like to go to the States too, so we can kind of like see both sides in a way.
Exactly.
But it's like a long life. You can live a lot of places.
Yeah, because that's one difference between our stories. Is like I was with the Swedish girl that I was dating in the U.S.
I forgot about that.
For 9 months before I moved here. So it's like, it was kind of cool being here because like she was the only like Swedish person that had like seen this like American side of me.
Yeah.
So it was like this really interesting connection of like she's seen how I'm in the U.S. and in Sweden, and then very few people have seen like both sides of me in that way. Whereas you established your connection here and then you moved here, so maybe he doesn't understand like your life back home as much. And I can see why you would like want to have that perspective in the relationship.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's traveled to the U.S. like a lot, and like we did a tour together because like I'm a musician, so like his second time in the U.S. we played like 20 shows and like drove 7,000 miles in a van, like playing shows in all these different cities on like the East Coast. So I feel like he got to see like some of that, but only for seasons. Like and that was fun because it's like the culture difference between like Boston and Alabama, and like going and sort of feeling the whole like American picture, not just like New York City. But I think it will be fun to like live like life and not just like an extended vacation.
Yeah, exactly. That's really, really cool. But another thing I thought was interesting is that you did the exact same thing that I did in terms of like moving here. You came on a work permit instead of a Sambo visa. What has that been like in terms of like, have you noticed the difference between the work culture in like an American workplace and a Swedish workplace? And like, what was your first job in Sweden? Like, how was there anything like surprising about like the way that people work here?
Oh, for sure. I feel like I'm still experiencing that like 2.5 years in, where it's a very different work culture in like how people work. Like people come in at different times, people leave at like 3 p.m. to like go get their kids, and I love like the flexibility of it. It's amazing, but it's still like very foreign, where I'm like, but we have like a deadline, so we have to like stay later and work, or like in just like the drive, I guess, is different. But also like Sweden is super entrepreneurial, so it's like it's working, which is like perplexing to me. But
it's interesting because I feel like people are more relaxed and they have more like a work-life balance, which I think is good for like long-term productivity.
Exactly.
So I think there's a lot of positives to that. But one thing we were discussing earlier is like some mind-blowing things. For example, the queues at Arlanda. For those of you that don't know, like the Swedish airport in Stockholm, it's got like extremely long security lines where like people are waiting like 3 or 4 hours sometimes to get through the security lines. And the problem is that when the airport hires new security force, they had a bunch of cutbacks during COVID, and when they hire new security people, because it's like a position that the police want to look into and make sure all the security people are having background checks and vetted, and so that process takes time. So they are not able to like fill the demand for all the people wanting to travel this summer. They're not able to hire people fast enough because every person they hire, they have to wait like 2 or 3 months for the
police queue
to then accept them and allow them to work there. So it's really crazy because like we as Americans are like, how is this acceptable?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, then you have to like work faster.
Yeah, hire more police officers to process more, allocate resources, up the budget, like take care of the problem, work longer hours, pay people overtime, whatever. Like, don't have this kind of issue. That's like the American mindset.
You're like, it just is the way it is. I'm like, but it could be different if you decided to like change it.
Exactly. And that is like a huge difference, I think.
For sure.
And it was like the same experience I had when I first moved here, like applying for a work permit. And I'm like, these kids at the school that I'm trying to work at, they don't have a teacher. Like they need somebody. Yeah. And I would like call the immigration office every day. Like go in like every week and be like, hey, what's the progress? What can I do?
Yeah.
I was like, couldn't I just pay like an extra few thousand crowns and you just hire more people and process people and just get it done rather than like having people wait for 4, 5, 6 months. I mean, even now, like I applied for my recent like residence permit and it's been over a year.
It's insane.
I'm like, I'd rather just pay a little bit more and have people like working on it and processing the case.
I asked that same question. I was like, can you like pay and get in like a fast line? They're like, no, it's very not Swedish.
Yeah, it's just so weird when there's like inefficiencies because in a lot of ways Sweden is like so efficient and works so well.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's really surprising that, and I think maybe it is tied to the work culture of like it's more relaxing, but sometimes like when you need to get something done, there's not this same sort of like deadlines and stress and urgency that we might have in the US. And I think that's where you see some like pros and cons in that part of the culture.
But I mean, I've loved like working here because of the flexibility, and I've been really lucky to have like great colleagues as well. So it's like when we collaborate, like we can do things like really well and like not just like get it done, but like to do good work, which I think that depends, I guess, on like the culture of the company. But the work culture itself and like the overall picture in Sweden is super different.
It's really interesting. I think like a lot of times people are focused on like the bigger picture and the long term.
Yeah, which is good.
Yeah.
I mean, then you have like vacation and you like, I mean, it's so true, but it's like you live to work in the US and here you work to live.
It's insane that the US only has 2 weeks of vacation. I mean, I never really worried about that because I went into teaching and I thought I was going to be a teacher in the US. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm in a profession where I have a long vacation. Great, good for me, you know? But like here in Sweden, like everyone has like those 5 or 6 weeks of vacation.
Yeah.
And it's crazy that the US's standard is 2. And even other countries in this part of the world, like Finland, for example, they've been experimenting with things like 6-hour work days or like that they would have 4-day work weeks. So like different things like this to have more of like work-life balance. And one thing that I think is really interesting is that like if you have an 8-hour work day, you're going to spread out your work to last 8 hours. Yeah. And if you have like a 5 or 6 hour work day, I feel like you get the same amount of stuff done. Yeah. You just like super focused and efficient in that time. Yeah. And you can make it happen, right?
Yeah,
so it's like the perfect example is like when I was in Spain this winter, I would see people working from like 9 in the morning till like 8 or 9 at night sometimes. I don't know if they've accomplished more than what the people are accomplishing in Sweden in like a normal length work
what
day.
Are they doing? Yeah.
So
no, but they have something going like for Sweden because it's like the most unicorn companies, like $1 billion companies outside of Silicon Valley, and like there's so much innovation and like new companies and like especially in the tech space, like where they're at the forefront. And you think of like, oh, Silicon Valley is the place, and I mean it is, but like per capita, it's like we're right behind that here in Stockholm. It's so interesting.
People are very entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
And this was another interesting thing that we talked about as well, like how people in Stockholm, I feel like having this like being the biggest city in Sweden, a lot of people that are like hustling and like trying to make it from any part of Sweden, they're like come to Stockholm, and Stockholm's like this like epicenter of like entrepreneurial people. I mean, you're from the music industry as well. You see lots of people.
So much here,
I mean, you have to be an entrepreneur to be a musician, right? You're producing, you're marketing yourself, you're doing all these things. How has that been like for the music scene? Like, what has that been for your experience being a part of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing here. I spent like a lot of time in the US. Like, I was in Nashville for like 7 years doing music and spent a lot of time in LA. And like, it's pretty refreshing in Stockholm. Like, there's so many huge people here that have like, I mean, produced everything, like Max Martin or any of these people who produced all the pop music and wrote all those songs. But it's like very down to earth in a way that I didn't experience in the same way in the States. And I think part of that is like just Swedish culture, where it's like you're just doing your own thing and you're like making it work. But I mean, this is like a powerhouse. Like, it's the biggest exporter of music in the world. Yeah. And like it's so much good pop music. So it's been really fun to like come into this space here, and like I just recorded a new EP with like 2 Swedish producers and like so many talented people, but like the vibe is also really good, which is refreshing.
It's crazy, and it's crazy how many Swedish people are like behind even pop stars in the US. For example, I just went to see a concert because my friend had some tickets and then was out of town. He's like, hey, go see these people, otherwise these tickets will go to waste. I was like, sure. It was Vargas and Lagola were the artists, and I had recognized some of their songs because they had worked together with Axel and Grosso to produce some songs. And I'm like, wait, okay, that's another Swedish artist. And then I was like Googling them, and it was like, oh, they've written for like Lady Gaga, or produced for Lady Gaga, or like other just huge names of worldwide superstar types of artists. And a lot of the people like powering these big time artists is like,
they're like Swedish producers. Yeah, I mean, all the Taylor Swift stuff. I mean, everything from like starting kind of at Britney Spears. Like so much of like the top 40 pop music is written by Swedes.
Yeah.
Like tons of it.
And in terms of electronic music as well, I mean, my favorite DJ of all time, Avicii, Swedish, Swedish House Mafia, Alesso, Axel and Grosso, like all of these artists, Galantis, like the list just goes on and on and on of like Swedish DJs. Really crazy. And then the pop scene, of course, you got Zara Larsson. And then you can't sleep on like the actual like Swedish music where they're speaking Swedish in the music as well. Like maybe it's not as renowned worldwide, but they have a lot of talented Swedish artists.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people are like willing to take like the chance to be a musician because of how Sweden is structured too. Like you have healthcare and you have education and all these things, so like why not try either to start a business or to become a musician? And I also think the darkness plays a big role. It's like half of your year is so dark, so you spend a lot of time like inside creating music, and that's like what so many people say. It's like that creativity space is different here than like if you're living in somewhere like Spain.
Yeah, no, I thought about that completely. Like I think my YouTube channel, one reason I was able to build it up so quickly in the beginning is like I started in January when I moved here.
Totally.
And just going through the dark, cold winter, it was like my activity where I'd come home and I would edit for like 4 or 5 hours every night because it was dark. I couldn't go out. I couldn't do anything. And I was like so productive. It's got to be like the same thing.
No, it's so real.
For musicians. Whereas if you're in a country where it's like 20 degrees Celsius and sunny in the winter and you're out going skating or beach or whatever, like you're not going to have that same sort of like intense focus on that thing. And then to your point again with like when people have those basics taken care of, like healthcare, insurance, all these things,
take the leap.
They can take the risks. And that's one thing that I think America doesn't fully understand about like entrepreneurship, because like when people do feel like they have those basics taken care of, it enables entrepreneurship in a lot of ways. So I think we could have some things to like learn from Scandinavia in that regard. Granted, the taxes here are insane, like especially when you are an entrepreneur and you see the tax bill ends up being like 50% of everything you make, you're paying back to the government. So I mean, that's again,
it's a balance.
Pros and cons. And I've always said on my channel, like, there's no right way or wrong way, but it's just so like interesting to like notice the differences. And really interesting that you've noticed like the exact same things. That
Absolutely. I mean, it's a really interesting country in that way, because it's like you have that social net, but it's super entrepreneurial. And I think that's why I wanted to come here too for music. I mean, they've been at the forefront for so long in just like creating pop music and just really amazing songwriters and producers. So it's fun to be here. And then it's like the mix of those really, really talented people and like a culture where you can still like balance work and life. It's pretty cool.
And the lifestyle, it's really nice here. So I think right there we should maybe wrap up the video so it's not too long this time. But if you guys want to see more of Gracie, leave some comments down below and ask some questions. Maybe we can go deeper into some of these things now that we're both living in Stockholm.
It's amazing.
Cool. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. See you guys later.